Hey everybody, it's Tripl-L coming to talk about My Hero Academia chapter 264. I was almost going to say chapter twice. Anyway, hey guys, hope you all are doing well. Hope you're all staying safe. Hope you all are not dying of boredom. Let's just get into the chapter. In terms of general stuff, I gotta tell you guys, I really loved the chapter. I think this was really fun. Man, I love Twice. I wish Twice could just join the heroes because I feel probably better if he joins the heroes. I feel bad for him, and the things that we are getting in the chapter, I think there's a lot of interesting things that we can talk about when it comes to Twice, because the things that make him awesome are also the things that put him into the position where he is in this particular chapter. And there's some rhetoric that we can talk about when it comes to Twice and what the villains believe and how Twice's problems and the villains' style of treating their allies just come together to be consistent and also make the problems with Twice worse. And when I say problems, I mean like in-story problems, not like writing problems. The writing's excellent for this because it's all consistent. When we talk about the villains in Twice, they have a very negative reinforcing relationship. They're really cool to see in action, and when you have moments like this, it's really interesting to play the responsibility game. Like, who is responsible for what's happening here? And it's interesting to see when people talk about that kind of stuff too. Any other things I want to say before we get into the chapter proper? Let me remember, got my notes in front of me. Oh, no, the author, one great thing is that he was doing amazing stuff with the imagery, painting Hawks as the evil person. And as the conversation evolves, Hawks goes from being evil and it changes it to something a little bit sadder. One thing that comes out of this is that we see a betrayal for Twice, but we do get to see something that changes my perspective on Hawks' character. For instance, by the end of this chapter, I have a completely different impression of what I believe could have happened with Best Jeanist, because this is not the character that I thought we had. This Hawks in this chapter has turned into a little bit more of heart as opposed to the pragmatist that I thought he was. So, props to the author on that. And speaking of more props to the author, I said last week that Hawks should have gotten rid of him. I don't recall if I mentioned that Hawks would feel bad for Twice. I should check that out. Let me check that out real quick. Okay, yeah, I went back and checked it out, and I was being super cynical about it, but whatever. I love the surprise that mentality got me. But that's still like the gist of what I was saying last week is Hawks gave Twice way too much time at the end of the day there, and we'll talk about that as we get into it. But the big takeaway I have, Hawks is this has like changed my opinion of Hawks a little bit, and there's nothing really bad about it. Like, I still think this can all be I think this is all still really, really good. Anyway, any other things to say before we get into the chapter read through? Oh yeah, man, my first interaction with chapter 264 was like last night. I was Google searching it, and people had already made videos about it, and they were like, "Who's the real traitor?" on like their video titles, and it's like, what? It really primed me for a different thing, but then when you get into the chapter, it's like, what are you talking about? We all knew that Hawks was a traitor. We all knew this was going to go down. What are you talking about? If anything, Hawks is less of a traitor for not just straight up killing Twice, or at least maiming him. You know what? Maybe killing him is a little bit too rough, but at the very least, like, neutralizing him. Like, you don't want Twice to be able to run around in general. I think, in my humble opinion. But who knows? Anyway, let's get into it. Let's talk My Hero Academia and do the page walkthrough proper. Okay, so the first page that we got, here's my note. We get to see various exits, 3 of them exact. That was really cool, and it's cool to see some hero designs going in there. And we actually have someone really interesting in this first page that I'm showing you here. This is the guy from the Bakugo Ochako fight. So it's really interesting to see that his quirk lets him produce debris or stones or something like that. He's producing them from his body. That's really neat. It's cool to see him. Like, really, everyone is here. It's cool to see him. I wonder if we're going to see the girl that was with him during the Bakugo and Ochako fight. That would be cool. And on the same page, we get to see a quick shot of the assembly hall, and we do not see any Makia. Now, I've seen some chatter on the internet saying maybe Makia's off getting ready to do a raid or something like that. And it's like, that'd be cool. But for right now, I'm going to have a bit of a conservative prediction. I'm going to say maybe Makia's just sleeping somewhere. Maybe Makia come rushing in. Maybe Makia's keeping an eye on the hospital. Oof, that'll be terrifying. We'll have to see. Like, Makia is the doctors. In my mind, he's the doctors, not the Liberation Armies. The doctor might be keeping Makia close by. which doesn't really make sense because we haven't seen the Doctor act on that, but we'll have to keep an eye on it. Now we go into page 2 and 3, and here are my notes for this one. We have Rikia, and we're being reminded of his baldness. Every time I'm being reminded of this, I remember all the times that I didn't understand that they were calling him bald. Okay, receding hairline, right? We also get an interesting note that communications are jammed as heroes are high-fiving. So one thing, it's cool to see how they destroyed that other building. I can't tell if it was the group with the Bakugo Ochako guy, but I am very interested in the comms being jammed. That is very interesting. I wonder who's jamming it. Could be any electric user, but I'm really hoping that there is going to be a little bit of cameo from Labrava and Gentle. Just because when I think about it, everyone is here. If the guy from the Bakugo fight could be here, they could be here. I mean, that would be really cool. I'd be very happy if that's the thing. Anyway, other thing that we get when we go to page 7 is that we have Rikia getting stressed because of his quirk. That was neat. And we also had, let's see, I said page 7, I mean page 3. We start up a trend with the kids being thanked. Starting with Cementos saying stellar work to Kaminari. And I love this. I think this was feel good. If there is a theme in the chapter that the author kind of squeezed in there, you look at it and it's how the teachers or how the pro heroes are thanking the students. That was beautiful, and it really helps alleviate the situation, and it really helps boost morale. It's cool to see your characters being appreciated. It's cool to see this kind of respect. I love these little moments in manga, and I love it here. And I love that the adults took the time to tell the kids, like, hey, you're doing really great in these situations. Okay, now we move on to page 4 to 5, that giant, wonderful spread of the disaster that's occurring here. And unfortunately, when it comes to the villains, we're kind of seeing what I imagined we would be getting. If you recall, I mentioned that those designs we're only going to get like maybe 3 or so pages of them. And last chapter, we also talked about how most likely this kind of combat was going to go out. And in this page, we pretty much see that, you know, you have the charge guy deciding he's just going to overload Kaminari, which I have a comment about that. And then we just see good old Edgeshot just neutralizing a bunch of villains all at once. This is the epitome of quirk-based combat, especially when you're in the upper groups. So before going into a quick count up of who got nuked in that shot with Edgeshot, I do want to just point out that when it comes to top hero combat, in order to make top hero combat effective and fun to follow in a manga, you need to have a villain that can neutralize the majority of kill shots, like the Nomu. For instance, think about how often Endeavor and Mirko delivered attacks that would just end people when they are fighting those Nomus. Mirko's delivering these like brain-crushing head kicks, or not brain-crushing, but you know, she was kicking in a lot of ways that would be fatal if these Nomus didn't have regeneration. What I want to say about that is that makes sense when you're talking about top heroes. These top 10, top 20 heroes, they know that they need to minimize civilian casualties, and they also have to do things in a relatively responsible way. So how does that manifest when you're talking about combat? Well, naturally, it means that these people will be believers in quick and strong. Like, you want to get rid, or you want to neutralize the threat as fast as possible. So people like Endeavor and Mirko, we've seen they're capable of doing that, but in terms of a manga, you know, maybe not the most fun thing. And how that translates here is that you have Edgeshot just quite literally doing a kill shot across multiple people. If you want to give Edgeshot a person that he would struggle against and you get like a nice shonen fight out of it, you need to put him up against someone who can be destroyed on the inside without having too much repercussions. So either someone with regeneration or like a slime. Those are the type of things that Edgeshot would do well with. But when it comes to these villains, and their quirk's still unknown, it's like, these guys are going to go down. The man can puncture holes in your lungs. Look, if he goes off a little bit to the left, he's probably going to be able to puncture a hole in your heart. These people are all pretty much walking dead, man. In order to make top hero combat work, you need the Nomus. But I do love how that reflects the perspective of a top hero. They're quick and strong. Now, in terms of who went down in that particular shot, if you look at it, we did lose 3 advisors, most likely. Just from the designs I'm looking at on first glance here. For one of the girls with the mole on her head and one of the monstrous looking guys, they've been taken down along with Charge Guy. Pretty unfortunate. I do hope that we get to see those 2 again. One thing that's interesting here is that if you look at the one that I assume is a girl but has the mole on the head, it doesn't look like Edgeshot was actually able to get into her chest, because he's not coming out of her chest. he's coming from her side. So that's actually kind of interesting. She might have been able to have dodged it, and she's one of the few ones that actually has an effect going on. We'll have to see how that manifests in a chapter in the future. One final thing about this page is just the guy deciding that to neutralize Kaminari, he's just going to try to overload him. I think, you know, probably not the best option. That doesn't seem like a good tactical maneuver. Why would you wager on seeing how much this person can soak up? Like, what if he can soak up all of it? What that tells me is either this guy doesn't have a really good strategic brain, or they just don't have a quirk that can neutralize as many people as there are on the field, so they need his quirk like to be active again. It's just, I don't think this was a good maneuver. It's only a good maneuver if they were squeezed on resource. Now, in terms of whether or not these characters are going to be standing up again, like is Charge Guy going to be standing up again, all it really takes is a healer. They might have a healer there. That's all it would take. And I'm still a little bit, I'm keeping an eye on him because that scar on his head is kind of freaking me out, because that's telling me that Jiro has to get involved here. And for Jiro to get involved, like I said last week, things have to go really bad. We'll have to see. Okay, so we move into page 6 and 7. And what I'm looking at here, we get the confirmation of what Edgeshot did to all those people, which is terrifying. And also that degree of control. Nice for you, Edgeshot. And then on this page 6, we get a wonderful little shot of Midnight that I really appreciated. So the second panel on the page, you see Midnight's whole progression. It's like, Midnight, you're like a gymnast, like holy crap. And I love seeing her fans. I never really thought about what the fans could do for Midnight, but it makes a lot of sense when you think about it. Anyway, one thing I do appreciate is the level of detail on Midnight's sleeve as she's doing her flips around. You could see that she's torn off a good portion of at least her left sleeve, and we do see that Charge Uncle is going to sleep pretty much. So cool that we got him more or less neutralized. I'm still holding out hope for the advisors, but we still need to see how the author wants to treat it. These characters are pretty much the characters that the author can afford to cut out, right? If people like how these characters are and they want to see more fights, the author can add them in. If people don't want to see fights, the author can take them out. I have no idea what kind of feedback the author is receiving about these chapters. And then page 7 just has us seeing Kamui Woods doing stuff and Mudman starting up stuff. We go into page 8 and page 9 and we can see Class 1B doing amazing stuff. And we still have the pros thanking everyone for doing a great work. And when I say everyone, I mean the kids. So again, big theme in the chapter. I really like it. Really feels good. And I'm looking at She-Mage and it's just like, this is adorable. This is really adorable. She does deserve to be thanked. One interesting thing here is that she's holding her breath and she's also like really beating hard. Like her heart's beating hard. So I like that. It does show that she is still very anxious about the situation. The author's putting more emphasis on that because he's taking the time to tell us that she's scared. He's taking the time to tell us that her heart's beating fast. Okay, do you want to keep building on this, author? Because that seems to me like you want to keep building on this. So that tells me that I have to keep an eye on this girl's character for a little bit. Or did you just have enough time to be able to give us that little bit of extra detail? I'm not sure. I'm looking at the page. I think it's adorable. She-Mage says that she's going to do crowd control and she's letting other people go past her. I think this is all great. But it is interesting. I am happy for these kids. And again, She-Mage shows why she is a terrifying girl, man. Like, if there was ever a quirk that you need to steal, it's this girl's. I would steal it. If I was all for one, I would definitely steal it. Like, putting mushrooms in people's throats, it's too powerful of an ability to pass up. We move on with page 9, and we see that Hawks is talking to us about how he got information about data and timeout by code. I appreciate Hori gave us the confirmation of how the information got out, but given that Hawks was already working with code, I think this more serves as a nice little reminder confirmation as opposed to like something groundbreaking. Still appreciate it from the author because it's better to have no loose ends as opposed to having loose ends. One thing that's happening here as well with Hawks' feathers is that you see something being destroyed and you see some rips going on. And the only thing I could think of is either Hawks is spreading out more feathers to go out and keep an eye on the environment, or most likely Hawks is destroying the microchip. I think it's fair to say, especially when you see debris coming out of the feathers, he's probably destroying the microchip. Really cool stuff. Now, I forgot to mention this last week, but with the amount of feathers that Hawks has left, honestly, he probably has this whole room scouted out. or not even the whole room. He probably has the whole building scouted out. So when you have Dobby coming for him at the end of the chapter, like Hawks probably knows the guy's coming. He's the number 2 hero, right? Or yeah, number 2. It's not number 3. It's number 2. He's number 2 hero. He knows what's up, right? He knows how to handle situations. This is the man that was able to like split his attention and help a little old lady cross the street. So I do want to believe that he's not getting too caught up in the Twice struggle. Speaking of the Twice struggle, we're in the Twice struggle now. So going into page 10 and page 11. Okay, so as we get into page 10 and 11 and we start the Twice bit of the chapter, there's a lot of things that we can talk about, but it's kind of hard to structure that discussion. So we'll go through the pages and I'll like chime in a little bit as we go along. So for page 10, this is the start of the whole thing, and I really liked how the author played up the imagery. Having Hawks in the darkness, I really think that was a nice visual trick to really accentuate the events. And then as you go into page 11, you get to see that patented Twice vulnerability. Like, one of the best things about Twice, well, it's that he's vulnerable. That's both the greatest thing about him and the thing that puts him in a pretty bad spot. You know, whenever I see Twice crying, it's like, I wish you were on the hero's side, man. I wish you were on the hero's side. And when it comes to this chapter, you know, this is the kind of chapter where I have to always be like just telling myself, don't get caught up in the emotions. Remember, objectively, this Twice is totally in the wrong here. And that's one of the big tricky parts here, is that the chapter, with the way it's built, it wants you to see Hawks as a villain. But Hawks isn't a villain. All the way throughout, Hawks is trying to give Twice that helping hand. This is a tough situation in all regards. But it's interesting how the chapter works. And I think one of the best examples of this is the part on page 11 where he goes over, or Twice goes over, the things that have affected him. He remembers how Magnet was killed. He remembers how Mr. Compress lost an arm. Those things really weigh down on him, and we know this. He also talks about how he just carelessly led Shizaki to Shigaraki. Those are pretty big formative events for him. But from my perspective, I look at Magnet getting killed, and I'm just like, one less murderer on the street. I look at Mr. Compress getting an arm blown off, and I do feel bad about that one, but I think, okay, one less arm to kidnap kids with. I look at Shizaki going to Shigaraki, and I'm like, that's only a net benefit for you guys in the long run, because you guys got some drugs out of it. You know, I look at these events that Twice feels bad about, and I don't feel bad about those events. I feel bad that Twice feels bad, but I don't feel bad about the events, because Twice doesn't have much ground to stand on, I think, when it comes to justifying him as a hero. His most heroic quality is that he wants friends and he cares about his friends. But this is the villains show the negative applications of that particular heroic trait. And we'll talk a little bit about that once we get through the end here. Anyway, we go to page 12 and 13. Page 12 was just a beautiful page of vulnerability from Twice, saying that he had to trust Hawks because he felt bad for Hawks. And in that line, what's interesting there is that he wasn't wrong for feeling bad for Hawks. It's just, this isn't a simple situation. This is a situation where they're trying to minimize casualties. Twice is on the wrong side of history here, or he's at least on the wrong side here. Then we go into page 13, which just re-emphasizes some parts of Twice's flashback, just again reminding you Twice is a vulnerable character. This vulnerability, absolutely important for making this chapter work, and we'll talk a little bit more about it towards the end. Anyway, his overall notions here, like, how sad is it if nobody trusts you? He's not wrong in any which way here. It's just his judgment and where he ultimately aligns is the problem. Now, going into page 14, going into page 14 and 15 is where we see the excellent visual trick. I love the visual metaphor. Hawk slowly comes out of the darkness and we start seeing his face. And it's like, yes, that symbolizes how this situation was going. The moment that Hawks is not in darkness, he's not a villain anymore. That's what the author is telling you with that little visual trick. He's not a villain anymore. He is extending a hand as a hero. That's the cue that tells you shouldn't be seeing Hawks as a villain at this point. And the author accentuates it by having Hawks saying, I'll help you start over. So this is the part that really made me think, Hawks, I'm sorry. I judged you to be a little bit more of a pragmatist than I expected. And when I'm seeing Hawks say, because you're a good person and this is where it's coming, I can say honestly, I don't think that if Best Jeanist is dead, I don't think Hawks killed Best Jeanist. I'm gonna be very surprised if he ended up doing it, but now I'm starting to think if Best Jeanist is dead and there's not some kind of tomfoolery going around, it's not Hawks that killed him behind his back. It's that Hawks told him what he had to do, and Best Genius like fell on his sword for the sake of humanity. It's just, this is a little bit too kind. This is very kind of Hawks. Like, it's a really kind move. Anyway, page 15 shows us the problem with Twice. Hawks has now stepped into the light. He is acting as a hero, and Twice starts pulling away. He says, fresh start, that's a load of crap, and Hawks is being calm, trying to get Twice on his side. And this is with the part where you have to say, like, this is, what do you do when someone is refusing help? What do you do when objectively someone is in the wrong, but they refuse to see that they're in the wrong? That's the situation that Hawks is dealing with. And, you know, we'll talk about this again at the end, but the worst part about this is the timing when Hawks chose to do this. Anyway, page 15 had Hawks ripping away Twice's mask. I think this was a great move because we know Twice breaks down when his mask is off, and that's probably why Hawks did it. And then we go to page 16 and 17, which is again another beautiful, beautiful page. You have Hawks saying that he doesn't want to fight you. You have Twice pulling away in anger. It's unfortunate that this had to happen. And then you have a great shot from the author, not only with showing the distorted Twices being formed, but you have this shot of the feathers coming in. One panel, there's those motion lines. The other panel, there's no motion lines. And then there's just Hawks gritting his teeth. He stopped the feathers, and that's portrayed through the motion lines, from hitting Twice because he's conflicted about the situation. And what that ends up causing is that Twice goes into Sad Man's Parade. This is now the worst case scenario. So, you know, revising my thoughts from last week, it's like, Hawks, man, you messed up, man. You do not give Twice the chance to do this. You went too far, man. Okay, so this is the thing. I do not expect heroes to have developed emotional intelligence faculties. It's unreasonable to expect every hero to be a PhD in psychology. It's unreasonable to expect every hero to be a therapist. That's just not what they are. And honestly, with the way that Hero Academia Society works, like in terms of emotional intelligence, Hero Academia Society is not in any way more developed than our current society. So it's unfortunate, but Hawks, this is why you don't talk to a dangerous person when you're in the middle of an operation. People talked about, well, not people, but those YouTube videos, they talked about how Hawks is the biggest traitor because they're hurting Twice's feelings or whatever. You know, that's what the thumbnails implied. But it's like Hawks just pretty much screwed over the heroes. That's who he's hurt more here. So we'll have to see if Hawks can neutralize the situation. He has a lot of feathers out. Chances are he has feathers all over the place. Are they going to come in to help? Is Hawks going to be able to handle this? Is Hawks currently being blinded by his feelings? Hard to tell. We'll have to see. I'm really hoping that he's going to be okay. But the big thing I take away from this is like Hawks should have knocked out Twice. Should have knocked out Twice and got him away from there. There is no point trying to defuse a bomb in the middle of 10 other bombs going off. That's a waste of time. Hawks' judgment here is ultimately what caused this to go worse. And I think if we were to say Hawks should have knocked Twice out immediately, as opposed to have tried to talk to him, I think, you know, you, the dear viewer, could agree with that sentiment when you see the end of the chapter. But I think you also have to appreciate that Hawks legitimately was being a hero when he tried to talk Twice down in the moment. Hawks came to Twice and put things out in front of him. Hawks did this out of trying to make this terrible situation better. Again, bad judgment doing it when 10 other bombs are going off. But that's the big thing. I do want you to take extra note of the transition from darkness into light, because that's a move by the author. You know, Hawks doesn't control lighting. The author does, because he knows what kind of message he wants to impart on readers. So as we end the chapter, we have that final page of Dobby coming up, and Dobby's crazy. As always, scummy heroes are to blame. And it's like, Dobby, I don't believe you, all right? Your rhetoric, I know, is compromised. We all know your rhetoric is compromised. What that just tells us is that this gives us more characterization for Dobby. I'm really interested to see if this explodes. Maybe Dobby's feeling a little bit bad because he's the one that brought Hawks into the fold. You know, maybe like that could be an interesting game. I saw people commenting that potential alternative, and I think, yeah, could be very well. He could be feeling really bad. He could be racking himself up with guilt. We've seen that Dobby has some weird interactions with guilt before, from the bleeding that he had when he was thinking of Snatch. So we'll have to see what the author wants to do there. Overall, I did not expect to be going into this chapter and seeing a more idealistic Hawks. I really thought we were going to get more pragmatist Hawks. But no, we didn't. You know, as we talk about Twice and we're wrapping things up here, the final little things I want to say is, first, Twice, really feel bad for the character, but he's also the worst kind of character to have around when you have a charismatic leader. And what I mean by that is really the final parts of page 18, where he says he'd trade his soul for the villain's happiness, or for the League's happiness, and it's like, Twice is a wonderful follower, but if you have a terrible leader, you're in trouble. The type of person that Twice is the type of person that will commit atrocities in the name of a greater goal, of a greater group. And these type of people throughout history, you know, this type of behavior is what leads to the formation of negative outcome cults or other atrocities in history. A devout follower. If you get a charismatic leader who is a terrible person, having Twice with them is one of the worst things you could ever do, just from a personality basis. And that's really unfortunate here as we see this happening with Twice. He rejects Hawk's claims. Hawks did not approach the situation well. No fault of Hawks. He was trying to do the best in a bad situation. But one thing I do want you to take away from this is that while admirable, just remember, this personality trait is one that is not helpful in the world sometimes. It all depends on who this person chooses to align with, and Twice has not made a good choice of aligning. And in that point, we gotta talk about the beautiful parts about the villains and how Twice actually meshes, like how Twice and the villains' rhetoric meshes. And so what I want to say about that is that Twice is a very vulnerable person. Twice has his problems, but the villains accept him. And that's one of the beautiful things about the villains. They accept people. We know that this is a very this was a very hard distinction that the author made when it came to the League of Villains. They aren't prejudiced. That's a really big distinction. They treat Magne well. They treat Spinner well. They accept each other for what they are. And while that's a beautiful thought, in the villains, we see how bad that can be when scaled up. And the big thing here is, when you look at Twice, they accept Twice for who he is, but is that actually good? Do you not want Twice to improve upon who he is? Do you not want Twice to grow? The reality is, Twice is a vulnerable person. You shouldn't be putting this vulnerable person in any position of power within your organization. This vulnerable person should not have as much sway as Twice does. What are you going to do about Twice's mental trauma or his brain injury? Are you never going to get that fixed? Are you going to let Twice continue engaging in negative habits? I know that people don't like talking about their negative habits, and especially when it's being criticized, but this is ultimately the problem that we have here. This problem with Twice, as we go forward into the future of Hero Academia, if Twice is still with the villains and he hasn't learned from this time with Hawks, I will always be a little bit hopeful, along with very fearful, because when it comes to Twice, I will always know that they will always be a weak link in the group. And that's the thing. The villains have a weak link, but the villains aren't going to try to fix their weak link. And this just kind of goes into what the villains are about. The villains are anti-progress. Shigaraki destroying the world is anti-progress. These guys do not look that far ahead in the future. And that ultimately comes back to Twice. Twice isn't going to progress further by the hands of the villains. The villains are always going to unconditionally accept him. But this is where unconditional acceptance turns into inaction. The villains aren't acting to improve Twice or get him past his problems. And that's really one of the biggest tragedies here. It'd be better if Twice left the villains and went to another group of people that care for him and also are more pro-progress. But that's what I think. I think ultimately what you have here, when you look at the way that the villains are set up and you look at how Twice are set up, it's a great match. It's a great match. Twice is quite literally in a toxic relationship, only in the sense that, you know, the villains aren't going to fix their flaws because they unconditionally accept Twice. It's going to be really fun going into the future and seeing what's coming next. And I still, throughout all of this, look, man, to some degree, Twice has bad judgment, but I do want him to have a happy life. I do want him to get saved. He started his life in a pretty bad spot. He made bad choices, but he cares about certain principles deep underneath. And, you know, I wish this could have gone better, but again, I think this was just a great time overall between the drawing of Hawks, the use of darkness to light, twice saying no to the hand that could help him. This is a tragedy. This is a nicely constructed tragedy. Really love it. One last thing is that in all of this, the board is still intact. So it's pretty cool that the metaphor of the board is still at play here. But yeah, guys, let me know what you thought down below, and let's cut it there. I don't think I have any more things to ramble on about. So thanks for watching, and until next time, I hope you have an absolutely great day.